I wanted to talk about the continued fallout of Jimmy Kimmel. I thought this was really interesting, specifically yesterday. You kind of expect this to be a news story for a day or two, and okay, it's a big thing and it's now blown over because it's really not that important. In reality, right, Jimmy Kimmel's show had about a million people, give or take, watching it every single night. And if you do the math on 350 million people in the country, and I'm counting the illegals too, because you have to count them, especially if you're redistricting and giving congressional power. But specifically, yeah, if you do the math, that's like less than 0.2% of people watch the show. So I guess, I don't know, I wasn't expecting it to be like that big of a deal, but apparently it was. Now, on the photo here, you see a picture of good old Dick Blumenthal, who had some words, and he was just among many other people, including a former president, to share their opinions on the quote unquote censored late night comedian, who again's ratings were so low, I can't imagine why he was even on the air to this point, but he was. And I want to play you some of the arguments that the libs are making so that you can get an idea of how to respond to people who you meet in real life and go, I can't believe those fascists are canceling shows. Watch this from good old Dick Blumenthal, senator.
You may think of Jimmy Kimmel as comedy or entertainment, but censoring him goes to the core of suppressing free expression in this country. Other presidents have wanted to silence critics by threatening to revoke licenses or stop mergers. None has dared until now. What Donald Trump is doing through his lapdog chairman of the FCC is essentially to pressure these big corporations to silence any kind of criticism, any kind of satire, any kind of challenge. That is un-American and anti-democratic. And that's why we need to call out the chairman of the FCC. I think he needs to resign, Brendan Carr, and their kowtowing to him shows they have no backbone. They need to stand up. All of us do, because our democracy is at stake. What we're seeing is creeping, in fact, galloping authoritarianism. Fear and intimidation are the autocrat's instruments of power. And to spread this cancer of fear and intimidation is threatening to all of our rights, the entire body of democracy.
Okay, there's a lot of there's a lot there from good old Dick. I think that's the guy who also lied about going to Vietnam and serving in the war there. He was actually in the military, but he was stationed in Washington, D.C. But on the campaign trail in 2010, he said, when I was in Vietnam, and well, that's just a side note on good old Dick Blumenthal. He made some interesting comments there. Nobody has ever dared revoke the licenses of anyone because that would be censoring free speech. Well, good news, President Trump also didn't revoke the license to anyone. Now, I will say this in the interest of being fair and intellectually honest. There were some things that I probably wouldn't have said necessarily from the administration, but to say that suggesting or even like offhanded remarks of oh yeah, maybe we should review some licenses when you're asked on the plane flying back from Britain, which we don't need to play you the clip of that. I'm sure you've seen that already. Yeah, that's not hard policy. Let me know what he actually does. This seems to be a consistent theme with the libs of, I can't believe President Trump did this. Okay, well, he didn't. He kind of said it off the cuff, kind of, I don't know, tweeted it out. When it happens, let me know, because if they are actually pulling licenses, I'll be the first one to say, yeah, that's probably not the best idea. What's actually happening is the companies that were carrying Jimmy Kimmel's show already were not in a good place with him. The advertisers were revolting. The networks didn't want to carry them in their geographical broadcast locations. And this finally was the last straw. And the scapegoat now is pressure from the federal government. I'll tell you what, pressure is such a scapegoat because it's an intangible thing. That's like me saying, well, I did the dishes this evening because my wife pressured me to do so. Well, that actually is not the best example because there are actual tangible ramifications for that if I don't do the dishes. So that leave that off the table. The bottom line here is that all of the things that we're now finding out, which include reporting, I believe, from the New York Post that said, yeah, Kimmel was on the phone with the higher ups at Disney saying, hey, I'm going to go on and clean this up. And he couldn't even convince them that that would be a good idea because they said, he actually might make it worse. So we're actually going to go ahead and pull this all together. That's not government censorship. That is a business decision. And yet, we've got even more people piling on. President Barack Obama, who definitely didn't try to silence any of his pundits that he didn't like, or TV shows that started with an R and ended with an Ozan, for various other reasons that we won't necessarily get into right now, sent out a couple tweets that I want to show you, piling on to this whole idea of bad business being masked as Trump's fascist censorship. He says, after years of complaining about cancel culture, all right, we've already discussed why those are not the same thing. The current administration has taken it to a new and dangerous level by routinely threatening regulatory action against media companies unless they muzzle or fire reporters and commentators they don't like. He continues in the different tweet and says, this is precisely the kind of government coercion that the First Amendment was designed to prevent, and media companies need to start standing up rather than capitulating to it. Actually, I think he kind of has a point there. And I think that's the reason why I'm so fervently saying, now, dude, ABC's a big company. They're big boys. They have attorneys. If that were to actually happen, if the thing that you're accusing the Trump administration actually was put into practice, Disney would sue them. And I guarantee you they would find a federal judge to block President Trump because guess what? Apparently that's the favorite activity of federal judges. You find a federal judge in public, you ask him, hey, sir, what do you like doing? He's not going to say, I like to go golf, I like to go sailing. He's going to go, I like to block President Trump. So to say that that was even under threat is ridiculous in nature, and Barack Obama, of all people, should know that. I could go off into the tangent of where I think President Obama is afraid of a lot of things being uncovered in regards to the Russia hoax, but that'll be a story for a different time. The main thing that I think we need to focus on here is that it was a business decision, or at least all of the facts point to the fact that it was a business decision. And I think we need to remind people that, remember when you guys kicked the president of the United States off of all of social media? Not even like the former president. He was the sitting president of the United States, and all of social media said, well, we can't have this guy on our platforms, and they silenced and censored a sitting U.S. president. Now, I got a bunch of arguments, if you can call them that, in my comment section when talking about this, and they said, well, those are private companies. Yeah, dude, so is ABC. You think President Trump is the CEO of Disney? Like, is that how you think this works? If you're going to make the case that there was so much pressure that ABC couldn't withhold keeping Jimmy Kimmel on the air because of the pressure from President Trump, which I don't think happened, then you also then have to say that the pressure from all of the powers that be in the lib universe took effect when they censored President Trump off of every single social media platform. You can't have both things. Dick Blumenthal issued a statement. We watched the video. We don't necessarily, that's the graphic of it. He says, on Twitter, President Trump should be permanently banned. No private company is obligated to provide a microphone for a malicious campaign to incite violence. That again is Dick Blumenthal, who's horrified that Jimmy Kimmel, who was no longer funny, by the way. I agree with Vice President J.D. Vance on this. He used to be really funny. Me and Charlie disagreed on this. He used to be funny. He was no longer funny. So I don't know. It's fascinating, the flip-flops. I didn't know that we would have to do an entire segment continuing to talk about Jimmy Kimmel's show, which again, 0.2% of the population watched on any routine basis. But there it is. You've got a bunch of people lining up on the lib side of the aisle, making this their Kilmar Abrego Garcia, choosing to die on a hill that is very comical to die on.